The starting point was Barrow-in-Furness in northwest England, home of Vickers Shipbuilding and Engineering Limited. The destination, Dounreay Naval Reactor Test Establishment on Scotland's northernmost coast. Along that bleak and rocky coastline lies Sandside Bay. The transport operation itself comprised of 5 stages, the first of which called for loading the reactor and a variety of associated ancillary equipment onto 2 small barges. Skidways, jacks and push-pull cylinders. In the skidways, a succession of PTFE sliding pads see to it that friction is kept at a minimum. First, the barge with the ancillary equipment is moved out of the Barrow dock system. Later, the barge with the PWR-2 will be taken from her specially prepared berth at spring tide. The secondary units, the primary unit. First to be positioned over the submerged deck is the barge with the secondary units. It will eventually be moored against those guide stanchions pointing out of the water. The loading procedure goes like this. Giant 2 is submerged by flooding her ballast tanks with sea water. The barges are positioned over it in the proper order. And then Giant 2 is deballasted, lifting barges and cargo out of the water. The same situation translated into reality. Mooring the barge with the secondary unit. Awaiting the primary unit, the barge with the PWR-2. Up at Sandside Bay, preparations have been made to beach another barge, the brand new Smit Barge 1, at right angles to the coast at the start of the 1-mile track. Her job? To act as a jetty for the Giant 2. A landing strip had been dug out and covered with sandbags to protect the barge bottom when it came to rest here. 30,000 sandbags, each one filled and placed by hand. And the same scene at high tide. The coast of Sandside Bay at low tide and at high tide. The yellow line shows the 1-mile track with, at the top end, the turning pit and test buildings, at the coastal end, Smit Barge 1 and Giant 2. Maneuvering the Smit Barge 1 onto her position on the sandbags. And this is where the story will continue on land. The submersible's ballast tanks were flooded with water to prevent shift. Here too, the gap between the 2 barges is filled in to give a smooth and even ride. And so to transport technique number 3, rolling PWR-2 over 90 inflatable rubber airbags, each one 9 meters long, 60 centimeters in diameter, and carrying a total weight of 2,400 tons. Up and down a hill with a maximum incline of 5.5%, covering a distance of 1 mile. Making use of 2 40-ton traction winches installed on deck and tackles secured to the rock anchors at either side of the track, the barge carrying PWR-2 rolls slowly but surely towards its destination. There was nothing new about this technique, but until this point in time, the record was a weight of 1,000 tons over a distance of 100 meters. Now the figures read 2,400 tons and a little over 1.5 kilometers. Steering loads of this order can be quite tricky, but with experience, a degree of careful calculation, and a few lusty commands of the good old right hand down a bit variety, it was possible to keep things on a steady course. As soon as the airbags came free at the rear, they were taken to the front again by local tractor drivers, while some of the more technical staff made sure that the bags still rolling were kept at the right air pressure. Rumour has it, by the way, that airbag racing will replace tossed Highland games. The journey from the bay to test establishment took 6 days at an average speed of over 30 meters an hour. However, airbags could not have coped with the final turn into the building. And so the fourth transport technique was introduced, the so-called water skating, carried out in the turning pit at the end of the sand track. The turning principle is simple. The unit enters the pit and is put on the water skates to reduce friction, so that winches and tackles can turn it into line for final transshipment into the hull. From this reservoir, pumps supply the water to the 28 skates, which are in position under the barge. By means of heavy tackles connected to winches at the edge of the pit, the load is maneuvered towards the desired position against the retaining wall. Water skates are basically large pallets made from plywood, in this case measuring 2.5 meters by 1.2 meters and 20 centimeters deep, and having a rubber strip around the bottom edge. Water was pumped into the skates at high pressure to lift the load off the ground. Much the same principle as the hovercraft, only using water instead of air to give lifting capacity, in this case about 90 tons per skate. The pumps are switched off only when the moving is completed and the load is where it has to be. For the last stage of the reactor's transportation, it was back to the skidways, jacks and push-pull cylinders to move it into the hull, from which the lower end wall panel had been removed. Precision now was everything to place it within the tolerance demanded. In the event, it was pretty good for a first effort,